Yo, what is going on, guys? Today we are just going to take a look at some classic gaming journalism lies. Now, to say that gaming journos like to lie is like saying grass is green. It's like saying water is wet. It's like saying the sky is blue. Basically, today's article is an article where a guy tries to claim that the Steam Deck is flawed because some games outside of Valve's control have DRM. Which, for those of you who don't know, DRM is basically always online to stop piracy. But yeah, they criticize Valve's Steam Deck for having games that have DRM, despite the fact that Switch games also have DRM. But in this article, they go ahead and hype up the Switch. It's very clear to tell that this article was written by a Nintendo fanboy. It's okay when Nintendo has games that have DRM on their console, but it's not okay for Valve. That is textbook fanboy logic. Anyway, let's get into the article. The article is called "The Steam Deck Needing Internet for Single-Player Games is a Crime." Already starting off the video with just a flat-out lie, or at very best, a disingenuous title. The only way you would need internet for a single-player game on the Steam Deck is if the publisher implements DRM, which is something that can happen on the Switch too, but you don't bring that up. Combine that with the fact that this article was posted right around the time the Switch 2 reveal was, and it's very clear that this is a shilling article. The Steam Deck is one of my favorite gaming systems. Sometimes I even like it more than my Switch. You like it so much that you decided to make an article shitting on it and being hypocritical towards it, with a title that is just a flat-out lie. It still feels surreal playing games like Marvel's Spider-Man or WWE 2K25 on this device. Playing WWE 2K25? That's a fate I wouldn't wish on anyone. And that's not even touching what else can be played on the handheld. With all that being said, I always feel some disdain for the system whenever single-player games need an internet connection. Not being able to play some of these titles in the great outdoors feels like a disservice and usually leads me to bring out my Switch again. So you feel disdain towards the Steam Deck because publishers, that Valve has no control over, decide to put DRM in their games. Games that you bought, by the way. But you don't have any disdain for the Nintendo Switch that also has games with DRM. This is what I mean when I say this is a fanboy article. Only Nintendo's console is allowed to have games with DRM, not Valve. For the record, this isn't Valve's fault. But you still feel disdain towards their system, right? If there's anyone you should have disdain for, it's the developers using DRM. They are the reason that you can't play your game on your Steam Deck when you're not connected to the internet. Oh yeah, something I forgot to mention. Steam literally warns you when a game has DRM before you buy it. It'll show like somewhere on the page, game requires DRM. If you didn't know that, you can refund under 2 hours of playtime. So you knowingly bought a game with DRM and now you're complaining that you can't play it offline? Gotta hate uninformed consumers, dude. This is just as stupid as someone buying a game when they're below minimum specs, and then complaining that their computer can't run the game. Maybe be more informed on what you're spending money on? Publishers often have to push to have internet connections for their single-player games, so they can collect data and show them off to the stockholders or higher-ups. It's an annoying practice that has become pretty common with a lot of AAA games. And the Steam Deck can't prevent this. Nothing can prevent this because it's baked into the game. You could have a NASA computer. You are not getting past that DRM unless you pirate. Little side tangent here. What I find funny is people who pirate games with DRM get an objectively better game than paying customers. Because people who pirate don't have to deal with any third-party launcher, and they don't have to be online. And if the DRM is causing performance problems like it is known to do, you don't have to deal with that on a pirated copy. You are literally being punished for being a paying customer instead of stealing the game. DRM companies claim this stops piracy, but it only encourages it. A lot of people will pirate just because DRM is in the game. So great job, DRM companies. You're winner. Valve's Steam Deck does have airplane mode and offline mode to quell our worries, but that can mess up some games upon activation. For the most part, players should be able to play their single-player favorites without much issue, but games with Denuvo can occasionally ruin things and require a connection. I'm looking at you, my precious Persona 5 Royale. I mean, I agree 100%, Denuvo should not exist. No system should exist that gives people who steal your product a better experience than those who pay for it. And no single player game should force you to be online. The entire point of a single player game is you play it by yourself, you don't need an internet, you don't need to connect to anything, it's, you just play it on your system. And a lot of people with bad internet connections, let's say they live in an area that doesn't offer high-speed internet, or they can't afford it, a lot of those players just specifically stick to single player games, and shit like Denuvo completely screws those people over. It is a genuinely anti-consumer practice. There is no benefit to the player of having Denuvo. Even some games that don't need an internet connection have weird online requirements. Dragon Ball Z Kakarot has separate save files for online and offline modes, which makes playing offline a frustrating experience. The save you had online won't be the same offline, so you're pretty much forced to have an internet connection for the single player title. Man, if only there were a way to know before you bought the game that it requires an internet connection. Like maybe somewhere on the Steam page that says you require a broadband internet connection? Oh wait. Yeah, this one's completely on you for not doing your research or even looking at the page before you buy the full price video game. Plus, you can still play the game offline, it's just you have a different save file, which does suck, I will admit. This is a Dragon Ball problem, not a Steam Deck problem. Admittedly, this isn't the biggest issue for Steam Deck owners, as many of them want to get those achievements. We can't blame them because receiving that little notification when getting the meaningless reward does activate some sort of melatonin in gamers. That's just the life for some achievement hunters, and it can be a pretty rewarding experience. The Steam Deck is still a great handheld that can play a ton of games that Nintendo Switch can't, but it would be better if all the single-player titles could be played offline. Let's hope that the Switch 2 prioritizes offline single-player like its predecessor. I will admit Nintendo does do a good job of making their games good offline, but with more third-party support, I don't know if that's gonna stay the case, man. Speaking of third-party games, I promise now that the Switch 2 is going to be more powerful, tons of developers are going to be trying to put their games on the Switch 2 that couldn't put it on the Switch 1 because of the system being underpowered. So that is definitely something to look forward to if you're buying a Switch 2. Personally, I'm gonna wait for a price drop, man. I don't really have that much else to say. This article was very hypocritical and obviously biased towards the Switch. Basically, DRM for Nintendo is fine and we won't mention that it exists, but we'll bring it up for the Steam Deck. If you liked the video, make sure to leave a like. If you didn't, you can leave a dislike, and yeah, peace. I'm out.